Do you ever feel like you don't deserve your success or that one day someone will find you out? You're not alone. Up to 80% of professionals experience imposter syndrome at some point in their career. Welcome to the Leadership Career Accelerator, where we help aspiring leaders like you build executive presence, influence with impact, and get recognized and promoted. I am longtime CEO Barry Moline. In this candid episode, author, entrepreneur, and executive coach Kris Kelso joins me to unpack the psychology behind self doubt and why the most accomplished people are often the ones who feel like imposters. Kris shares lessons from his book, Overcoming the Imposter, including how to replace proud insecurity with humble confidence. He also talks about why vulnerability is actually the secret to authentic leadership. You're going to learn how to identify imposter thoughts before they derail your confidence. You'll also learn why fake it till you make it creates more fear and what to do instead. And you're going to get a whole bunch of great mindset and behavioral shifts that help you lead with humility, courage, and clarity. You're going to discover how to turn imposter syndrome into your superpower and lead with the kind of confidence that inspires trust and growth. Let's get into it. The first question is, can you describe imposter syndrome and how it's been an element in your life?
Yeah. So imposter syndrome as a term was coined in the 1970s, actually. This is not a new phenomenon. It's been around for a little while. And it refers to the tendency of many people, it turns out, to undervalue their success and their accomplishments and even doubt the reality of their success. And so what can happen is, I look at Barry and I say, well, Barry's really successful because he's smart and he's savvy and he seems to have a plan and execute it well and he knows what he's doing. But my success has involved a lot of mistakes and trial and error, and I've gotten lucky a few times, and maybe some people have helped me along the way. And so I question whether my success is really legitimate or just an accident. And it turns out that a lot of people feel this way. In fact, some studies say that up to 70 or 80% of the population experience imposter syndrome at some point in their career, and it tends to be more prevalent among high achievers. So you asked, how has it impacted my career? Well, I've started multiple businesses. My first one I started when I was 31 years old, and I had no business training or education whatsoever, not even a college degree. And so I was just learning as I went. I was just figuring it out as I go. I read a lot of books. I talked to a lot of people. I tried a lot of things, and I was able to be successful. But I always wondered if there was something that I needed to know that I didn't know because I didn't have a university degree, and if that was going to be my undoing one day. And so it's just this constant sort of fear that maybe my success isn't real, or maybe I've just gotten lucky and my luck is about to run out.
Wow, that's really interesting. I can tell you that I've been a CEO for 29 years, and only recently has my imposter syndrome diminished.
Yes.
It's still there, but it definitely was there in spades when I first started. In fact, I didn't even know why I was given the opportunity to become the CEO. I mean, nobody said, we see you as a potential CEO. I just interviewed for a job, and it happened to be the job of the CEO, and I just got the job. And then it was like,
yeah,
do I need to start making Newt Rockney speeches?
Right.
What the hell do I do? And I'll tell you, one of the first experiences that I had where I realized I didn't know what the hell I was doing and I better get my act together was I was just having a private meeting with my future general counsel. So I had never had a general counsel before. I'd never really dealt with a lawyer before. I mean, my job before that was a senior manager in an organization, and it was somebody else's job to deal with the lawyers. It wasn't my job. I was in engineering, and it just never crossed my path, or my work experience didn't involve the lawyers. So I was having a meeting with my future general counsel, and it was on my trip to look for a house in this new city, and we were just getting to know each other.
Yeah.
And I don't remember exactly how this came up, because I remember it was a live meeting, but I said something about the spelling of the word council, and I confused it with like city council,
Mm.
COUNCIL versus SEL,
SEL. Yeah.
council versus council. Right. And he looked at me kind of with his head cocked, as a lawyer, would when you're trying to like bite your tongue and not call your future boss an idiot. And he said, well, there's actually a difference in the two words. you know City council is like this, and I'm the one who counsels you with legal
Yeah.
advice. And I thought to myself, like, oh crap, I honestly don't know what the hell I'm doing, but I've got some things to learn, so let me just shut
Yeah.
up once in a while and try to learn. It still didn't help. I still had plenty of times where I didn't know what I was doing. Nevertheless, I can remember that moment and thinking, boy, I've got a steep mountain to climb here. And
Yeah.
is that the experience that people find? They get those sort of like fish out of water situations. Like,
Yeah.
what am I doing here? Is that common?
Yes, it is. And there's an interesting thing that happens when you have some success, and as you advance in your career, your success puts you in proximity to other successful people. Success itself sort of propels you to circles and communities and groups with other people who are successful. And the weird mental phenomenon that happens is, as you are surrounded by more and more successful people, you feel less successful because you start comparing yourself to those. So it's kind of like, meeting your general counsel for the first time, and you're thinking, man, I'm talking to this, high powered attorney, this really smart person who understands law at a level that I'll never understand it. And it can make you actually feel inferior. It can make you feel less qualified and less intelligent than you did 5 minutes ago before you met this person. But of course you're not. You're in the company of that really smart person precisely because you're successful. And so I always remind people to notice and see the connection to other successful people as a sign of your success, and not fall into that comparison trap of ranking yourself against the people around you, because that will almost always backfire against you. If you're being surrounded by better and better and smarter and more successful people, then that comparison trap will just make you feel worse and worse the farther you go.
That's interesting. Sometimes our fellow CEO colleagues get into a mode of know-it-all. I don't know if I call it know-it-all syndrome.
Yeah.
They want to show how much they know, and that sometimes can have the feeling of, well, one, I'm not sure I know as much as they do, so maybe I'll just shut up. Or two, do I have to prove how much I know as well to sort of like be in this CEO club?
Yeah. I started to notice as I had more success, and, I founded a couple of different companies, and I've advised investors and done mergers and acquisitions and turnarounds. And as I found myself in those more interesting circles, there was this temptation in me to try to fake it. There's this advice that I really dislike, that is fake it till you make it. And there's several reasons why I don't like that advice. But one is that I noticed that when I was tempted to fake it, there would be this outward pride and even this arrogance that could develop as I try to appear as competent and self-assured as I can. But that outward pride is really just a mask for the insecurity that's going on inside, where I'm worried that someone is going to figure out that I'm faking it. And so I've begun to refer to that state of being as proud insecurity, where there's a big gap, a big delta between how you're acting on the outside and how you feel on the inside. And I've talked to a lot of people about this now, and I've come to realize that many people fall into this trap of proud insecurity where you're just really, you almost are becoming an imposter, or you are faking because you're trying to present yourself as more than you really feel like or believe that you are.
Wow. So, how do you stop yourself from going down that road?
Well, this is a question I asked myself when I started to recognize this phenomenon. I said, well, okay, if proud insecurity is dangerous and destructive, because there's all kinds of traps that you can fall into with that, what's the opposite of proud insecurity? And that is humble confidence. And that is where I came to this idea of humble confidence and started studying and ideating what does it look like to be both humble and confident at the same time. Because at first blush, those might seem like they're at odds with one another, but they're not opposites. Humility and confidence are not opposites. In fact, they make really great partners. So that began this journey of learning and figuring out how to move from proud insecurity, which I feel is a trap that we can fall into, to really walking and living in humble confidence.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. So, you've thought about imposter syndrome. I've also heard it referred to as imposter phenomenon. So, it
Yeah.
doesn't sound like a disease, but
Yes.
nevertheless, it's the same set of circumstances. You wrote a book. You wrote a book called Overcoming the Imposter.
Yeah.
So tell us about the book and what that was like in pulling your concepts together and then how you use the book.
Well, when I learned about imposter syndrome, first of all, it was really, really life-changing for me just to understand that this voice of self-doubt that's in my head, this is a thing that lots of people experience and that psychologists have identified, and they have given it a name, even though it's not genuinely a syndrome. It's not a diagnosable clinical condition. But it's a psychological trap that many of us fall into. And just realizing that was sort of a big weight lifted off my shoulders. And as I've talked with other people about it, I hear that often as well from others. They say, oh my goodness, thank goodness it's not just me. I thought I was the only one that had that inner critic, that voice of self-doubt, that I thought I was the only one that felt like I don't belong here and I don't fit in. And so the more I talked with people about it, the more the response that I got told me it was a widespread and really prevalent problem, especially among entrepreneurs and innovators and really ambitious driven people. As I said, studies have shown it's more prevalent among high achievers. And so at some point, I just really felt compelled to write something about this. And I started writing some short form content. I wrote an article on a website called Quora several years ago that has been viewed over 100,000 times. And nothing that I had ever written up to that point had gotten that kind of traction. And the article was about entrepreneurship and imposter syndrome, why entrepreneurs in particular are really susceptible to imposter syndrome. And so once I saw that kind of traction and reaction, I knew I had struck a nerve, and that started the process of writing this book. The book itself came out in January of 2021, and it has been fantastic. It has opened a lot of doors for me, but more importantly, it has helped a lot of people. I hear from people. I got a text message this morning, or a message through Facebook this morning from a reader who found my book and got the audiobook and the digital book, and they're going through it because they're embarking on a new phase of their career, and they're having those doubts and wondering, is this the right thing, and am I really capable? Now, I hear from people all the time who tell me that this book has changed their mindset, has changed the trajectory of their career, has given them new confidence, and in particular has given them the tools to identify that self-doubt when it comes in and to knock it down, to overcome it.
So I have a question about why, in particular, entrepreneurs and innovators
Yeah.
might be susceptible. I guess we should not necessarily differentiate them too much from just anybody who's working their way up in the world of business. But let's talk about that group just for a
Yeah.
moment. Is it because this is somebody who's really smart at a particular topic? They are creating a new app. It's a dating app. It gets really popular fast. They've got to build an infrastructure and a business structure. And now they went from being a techie who focuses on making a great app to now running a big company, and they've got to do a variety of other management skills that they had zero training for. Is that a general idea as to how these people find themselves and may be feeling like I'm a little bit out of my depth here?
Yeah, it's a big part of it. I mean, entrepreneurs, one of the defining characteristics is that they are willing to take risks and they're willing to try things and get outside of their comfort zone. Imposter syndrome happens outside your comfort zone. It rarely happens when you're doing something that you know very, very well and you've done many, many times and you are completely comfortable with and you feel, really confident. But if you're someone like me, my entire career has been trying new things and learning new things and starting new things. And I'm always adding something. I'm always kind of doing something new. And so I'm always, and Barry, I say always, I'm always in over my head in some area. I'm always doing something that I'm not super qualified for. I'm not, really, really experienced. I'm not an expert, but I'm learning. And part of it is that I love the learning. And I think entrepreneurs generally, they try new things because they love to figure it out. They love to problem solve. But that puts us in that unknown, uncharted territory where it's easy to feel like, oh man, what have I gotten myself into? A CEO named Toby Thomas once used a quote that has become my go-to description of entrepreneurship. He said, an entrepreneur is like a man riding a lion. Everyone around him is saying, wow, that is so amazing. That's incredible. I can't believe that person. I wish I had the guts to do that. That's incredible. And all the while, the man on the lion is saying, how in the world did I get on a lion? And how do I keep from being eaten by it? And that image is so remarkably accurate. I can't tell you how many times that I've been given accolades and even awards and verbal high fives and people cheering me on for the risks that I've taken and the things I've accomplished as an entrepreneur. And yet I'm not always celebrating. Sometimes I'm freaking out a little bit because what looks to others like strength and boldness and resolve feels to me like a series of near catastrophes. And so entrepreneurs as a group are just kind of in that state of everybody else tends to put them on a pedestal and think they're awesome. And yet they know, man, I'm just making this up as I go. I'm figuring it out. I'm learning as fast as I can because I'm in over my head. And in some ways that's the fun of it, but it also just opens a lot of doors for this self-doubt and this self-deprecating fear of, man, maybe I don't have it, or maybe my luck's about to run out.
So is the way out of this, or at least to address it, because I would tell you that even in my case, it just never goes away. It has diminished over time.
Yeah.
Is the way forward to be curious or to recognize that you're a lifelong learner and that you're going to be in situations where you don't know things?
It really is about a shift in mindset in several different ways. And I outline in the book 10 habits, some of which are mental and some of which are actual actions that you take and reactions to situations. But it's things like, I used to think that my learn as you go approach, like just diving in and figuring it out, I used to think that that was a weakness or a sign of weakness because I was unprepared. I wasn't ready. I was in over my head. And eventually I realized that, no, that's a strength that I have. I'm really good at diving into a situation and figuring it out. And that figure out ability is something that not everyone's great at and that I should celebrate and lean into. I should try new things. I should dive into new problems. And so by changing that mindset from I'm in over my head to no, I'm a learner and therefore I'm right in my element. Because when I'm approaching something I don't know, that's when I'm at my best.
So wait, pause there for a second. Pause
Yeah.
there for a second. What are you doing in those moments? Are you asking a lot of questions? Are you trying to sponge up as much information as possible? What's physically happening when you're in that moment?
It may be something like I'm launching a new product and it's a category that I'm not familiar with. A couple of years ago, after I published my book, the response that I got, people wanted a digital course. They wanted more material, something they could go deeper with exercises and a workbook and stuff. And so I set out to launch a digital course. Well, Barry, I've never built a course before. I've never built an online course on a platform. And so I started studying that and I did some experimenting and I built a quick and dirty version of the course and I ran a couple of cohorts through it and I learned a lot about what worked and what didn't. And then I hired some expertise to help me, some people who specialize in instructional design to help me rethink the next version of that course. And so it was a series of experiments to do that. Well, in that moment, I could either say, I have no business building a course because I've never done this before and this is not my expertise and why am I even bothering? Or I can say, you know what? What I do well is learn and figure things out. And I'm an entrepreneur. I start businesses. I create products. I launch things. But every one of those has a learning process. And that's what I'm in. And even when I fail, even when I make a mistake, even when I do something that doesn't work, it's not a failure. It's a learning process. And so I've come to realize, and this is another one of the mindset shifts that's really important, is to reframe failure as learning and to recognize that failure is not the opposite of success. It's an important part of the process of success. And so now when I start something new or try something for the first time, I make a decision in my mind up front that there's only two possible outcomes. I'm either going to succeed or I'm going to learn. And either one is good. But those are the things, those are the two options that I have, is I'm either going to accomplish what I set out to accomplish, or I'm going to learn something about it in not accomplishing it. And that learning is going to help me to win on the next try. And so it's a step in the process. So that's what I mean by making the determination that I'm a learner and figuring it out is what I do. And so I can try something new and not feel like that's a fault or a failure or a mistake. It's actually where I'm at my best, is when I'm learning.
Yeah, that's fascinating. In preparation for our talk today, I was looking at some materials on confidence and a little bit about imposter syndrome. And I came across this one technique, adding the word yet when you're looking at characteristics that you're not necessarily good at, but you want to get good at. And recognizing, hey, I've got some gaps in my knowledge or skills, and I'm not good at this yet. Yes. Have you heard of that before?
Yes, absolutely. It's a really simple 3-letter word that can change the definition and the mode and the emotion behind a statement. Barry, because we've had conversations about professional speaking. I've been speaking professionally now for 4 or 5 years, and publishing the book has helped with that. And but I'm still not at the level that I want to be. And here again, going back to the conversation about success puts you in proximity with other successful people. I am now connected to some professional speakers who are doing amazing, who are making 7 figures a year speaking and doing incredible things that I'm not even close to that yet. But there's the word yet, right? And so I can look at those people and say, man, I am not nearly as good as that person. Or I can say, I'm not nearly as good as that person yet, but I'm on the path. I'm making progress. I'm moving in that direction. And it's only a matter of time and how much effort I'm willing to put into it, because
Yeah,
I can
that's
get
great.
there if I'm willing to do the work.
Yeah. And I can see you in that realm. I can see clearly you've got a great topic, you got a fantastic approach, your delivery. I can see you as that seven-figure business person because there's a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah,
elements associated with it. But there's no
yes.
question. I can see all the ingredients right here. It's just a matter of continuing on the road until the point that people come to you because you're already doing the great things. There's not a
Yeah,
lot that you have to
yeah.
change. More people have to just simply recognize, you know what? I think it's going to be the result of this podcast that's really going to tip
That's
this.
really why I'm here, is to
Yeah.
get to that seven figures. Is
Yeah.
after I'm going to mark the day I talked with Barry on the podcast, and this will be the turning point.
Yeah. There you go. Well, let's talk about that book writing process.
Yeah.
How did you go about that? So like, it's not necessarily what's square one, but what are, what are the top 10 squares? What are the kind of things that you have to do to get organized to write a book? Because I think a lot of people see a book, see the outcome of that thing, and they go like, I don't even know where to begin. So
Yeah.
what are the elements
Yeah.
of the beginning of the writing a book?
Well, first of all, let me say that I am not a prolific writer. What I mean by that is I don't enjoy writing and I don't do it all the time. It's not something that just comes out of me. For me, writing is hard work. I think I'm pretty good at it. I think I can do a good job, but it is effort. It is not effortless like it is for some people I know that can just write and write and write. And so, for me, writing a book was always something that felt like a possibility in the future, but I knew that it would be a lot of effort. People told me for a long time, Kris, you should write a book. You should write a book. You have, great ideas and great content, and you should write a book. But number one, I wanted, if I was going to write a book, I wanted to have a really meaningful message and topic. I didn't want to write a book just for the sake of writing a book. This is not just a book about me telling my story for sort of the cathartic experience of telling my story, and hopefully you learn something from my experience. There is a good bit of me in this, but I also wrote a lot of other people's stories about this specific problem of overcoming self-doubt and wrestling with the inner critic. So number one, I wanted to have a really good topic that I felt like it really did meet a need. And as I said, as I was talking about imposter syndrome and even writing some of that short form stuff, I got a response that told me, okay, there's really something there. The second thing that I did was I spent a couple of years actually compiling and refining my ideas. I read a lot of research. I'm hesitant to say I did research. So many people say I did a lot of research. Really, I read a lot of research. I didn't conduct a ton of my own research. I did interview people and things like that, but I read lots of the scientific papers and research studies that have been done on imposter syndrome and tried to draw connections and really get, pull the best information from a broad swath of studies. But I was also talking to people during that time. And this is something, Barry, that I've seen people kind of make a mistake of. They have an idea and they spend a lot of time, what I call cooking it up in the kitchen, or sort of cooking it in the lab, and they go write a book, and then they want to publish the book and then start talking about their idea to wider audiences. And I often, when I'm talking to people who are thinking about this, I say, get out there and talk about your ideas as soon as possible and well before you write the book. Because when you talk to audiences and hear feedback, and when you do podcast interviews like this one, and I've done many of these, when you speak to groups and talk one-on-one with people about your ideas and your topics, you'll learn things and your ideas will shift. They'll change, they'll evolve as you learn more. And if you write that book sort of in private, in the lab, and then you go unleash it on the world for the first time, and that's the first time you encounter an audience and talk to someone and get feedback about your ideas, you may find out that the stuff you've written is a little bit half-baked, or your 3-step framework actually needs to be a 4-step framework, or the ideas are just not all complete. And so I tell people it was about a 3-year process to write this book, but only 5 months of actual writing. There was a couple of years up front of really collecting and refining and assimilating all those ideas. And then, Barry, the one thing that I did that I truly believe was the biggest contributor to the quality of this book is I hired a writing coach. It was a guy named Matt Litton. I'll go ahead and name drop him. He has written multiple bestsellers. He's sold millions of books that he has either ghost written for people or written himself. And so he really knows how to put a good book together. And I didn't hire him as a ghostwriter. I actually wrote the book myself, but I hired him as a writing coach. And he kind of took all my ideas. I did a brain dump on him of all the stuff that I was thinking about and really helped me to organize it. We spent several weeks just building the outline for the book. And once we had that outline, and it was about 12 pages of an outline of the chapter layouts and the stories that were going to go in there and where the data was and what the goal was of each chapter and how they connected from one chapter to the next. And once we had all of that, man, I felt really confident that I had a book, that it wasn't just an article that I was going to try to stretch into a book, but that there was really a good amount of content there and that it was going to flow, that people were going to find it an easy read. And I hear that a lot about my book as they say, man, it was such an easy read. I couldn't put it down. I breezed right through it. And that it was going to actually be really valuable and impactful. And so I often say the book is 10 times better than it would have been without Matt's help in just organizing all the ideas that I had. So all that to say, if someone's out there, they're thinking about writing a book, spend the time to refine the ideas, and then don't assume that just because you have great ideas, that also means you're great at organizing and structuring a book. Now, maybe you are, maybe that is one of your gifts or skills is laying all that out and making it flow. But I had some help with that made a huge difference. And he also was kind of a content editor through the process. So as I was writing, he was reviewing my writing, giving me tips, telling me when a story was going too long or when it needed to be tightened up or when a point wasn't emphasized well enough or something like that. And so his guidance and help, just as that writing coach alongside me, was so, so valuable.
That is great advice. Or let me go back to my story, counsel.
Yes.
On pulling a book together the way you thought about it for several years, pulled your stories together, examined the research of others, and then got down to the writing, of course, under the umbrella, the watchful eye of a writing coach, of a book writing coach, Matt Litton. That's fantastic. What a great path that you followed there. And on top of the coaching, I presume that he offered you, he's recognizing these are the ingredients of a great book that people are going to want to read. And of course, the feedback you get is this is an easy read. That's probably something that was a great value add from working with somebody like Matt Litton, right?
Yeah, it really was. I think I could have gotten all the ideas in there, but would they have been as cohesive and connected, or would it have been as easy to get through? I strongly doubt it. And again, that's not to say that I'm some terrible writer. I did the writing myself, but just having an expert to say, it's kind of like having a guide. If you go on a hike or you go take some expedition, you're going to have to do most of the work to go experience that. But it's really helpful to have someone along the way who can tell you about the pitfalls and the strategies and give you advice of what to do and what not to do. And so that's the power of having a good coach or a good guide along a journey like that. They just make it so much easier because they know how to make it smarter. And so you can work smarter, not harder. And then the end product is so much better. And I'm immensely proud of how my book turned out. One of my issues with perfectionism that I talk about in the book, for a long time I was afraid to try to write a book because I didn't think I could write a book that would be good enough that I would want my name on the cover. And so, and maybe that's a little bit of that imposter syndrome even creeping up. I mean, I certainly battled with it in thinking that I wasn't capable of doing something like that. But, there's nothing wrong and there's no shame in bringing someone alongside you who can show you how to do it really well. And then I'm really proud of how it turned out. I think it's a great quality product, and it's the evidence and the response I've gotten has demonstrated that it really has been life-changing.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, you mentioned coaching, and you're also an executive coach. And I'm wondering how you see imposter syndrome among your clients.
Yeah, it comes up frequently, as you might imagine. So I am an executive coach, and I got into coaching in part because I had some help from some good coaches along the way on my entrepreneurial journey. Just having somebody to confidentially process some of the toughest challenges and to voice those fears and those worries and those struggles that go on, the battles that we have inside that often you can't talk to anybody else about who is in your world, because they either have a stake or they have an agenda, or they are, they could potentially feel threatened by a lack of confidence or an insecurity or something like that. So I benefited from that for a lot of my career. And in 2017, I started the journey of getting training and eventually getting certified with the International Coaching Federation to be a leadership coach. And you asked how imposter syndrome has come up. I mean, I'll give you a couple of examples. I've had more than one small business owner come to me and say, at the start of our relationship, even before we were formally coaching, they would say something like, Kris, I think I've taken this company as far as I can. I've hit a ceiling, and I don't think I'm the person to get it to the next level. So I think maybe I need to hire a CEO or hand this off to somebody, or somehow, they felt like they couldn't take it to the next level. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs who start a business, they hit a wall at some point and they think, man, the business is not growing anymore, and it's got to be my fault. It's got to be because I've reached the limits of my capability. And in several of those cases, I said, why don't we work together for a year on identifying your gaps and looking at options and figuring out where you can improve and where you can grow. And if we can grow you, then maybe you are capable of taking this. And Barry, I'm happy to say in most of those cases, in fact, all of them that I can think of, a couple of years later, they had a thriving business. They doubled their revenue. They had a lot of growth and maturity, a lot of strengthening of their business. I've coached several business owners through an exit where they sold their company or they merged with someone else, and also acquisitions in the other direction where they're going out and acquiring a competitor. And so I've been able to kind of come alongside a lot of business owners and executives on their journey. And it's really, really so much fun, both because I just enjoy entrepreneurship and I love the challenges and the thrill of overcoming those obstacles of when you're creating something and building something new. But also I get to see a lot of variety, a lot of different kinds of businesses, a lot of different kinds of challenges and problems. But most of all, I'd say I just love helping someone overcome an obstacle that they felt like was insurmountable. And often the biggest obstacle is in between the ears. It's that self-doubt. It's that negative self-talk. It's the feeling of, I must have hit my limit and I can't see my way through this. And I just want to throw my hands up in the air and give up. And helping somebody to overcome that and seeing a great outcome and the joy and the benefits that come from that afterwards, it's so, so gratifying.
Well, when you're thinking about other coaches, you probably, as a coach, find situations among clients where you're not familiar with it. You, the coach, are not familiar with the client's business, and therefore, the client is saying, I need some help with this. Do coaches feel imposter syndrome as well? And if they do, how do they get through it?
They do. It's a really good question because there's several nuances to that. Number one, if coaching is done correctly, the coach doesn't have to be the expert in the conversation. And the coach doesn't have to have all the answers. In fact, they shouldn't be providing all the answers, because proper coaching is helping a client, guiding a client through a process whereby they figure out the answers. And so a good coach can coach almost anyone about almost anything. And yet, what you said is absolutely true. Coaches feel imposter syndrome often and sometimes very acutely. For example, I have clients that I'm coaching who are running businesses many, many times the size of any business that I've ever run. I have clients that I'm coaching who are in industries where I've never worked and have no experience. I have, clients that have many, many more employees than I've ever had. And so it can be easy to feel like, man, they're the expert in this. They know all about this and I don't. But as I said, true coaching, when it's done properly, I'm not a consultant where I'm here to tell you how to solve your problem. I'm a coach. I'm here to journey with you, to be a guide, to be a sounding board, to challenge assumptions, to question things, to ask the questions that you may not be asking yourself. And I can do that for somebody for which I'm not the expert on their situation, but I can draw the expertise out of them. And then we together can look at that expertise and say, what do we do with this? And so that's what's really powerful. But because of that, Barry, I love talking to coaches. In fact, next year, I'm going to be the opening keynote speaker at a conference for career coaches and resume writers and people in the services, the career services industry. It's the Park Thrive 2025 conference coming up in Chicago. I'm going to be the opening keynote precisely because coaches in particular not only see imposter syndrome often in their clients, but they experience it as well in their own lives and their own work. And so when I can help a coach understand what's going on with self-doubt and how to counteract that narrative and how to overcome it, it's a double win because they help themselves and they help their clients at the same time. And I love that.
Yeah, that's fantastic that you're able to work sort of both ends of that spectrum, both helping clients and helping coaches. When I was younger, coaching was not popular. And I don't know that there was any negative perspective associated with it. There just wasn't a big universe of coaches available. And I guess there might be an association with therapy. If you need a coach, well, what's wrong with you? Just barrel through it, buy a book and read it and figure out the elements of management you need to work on and figure things out for yourself. How have you seen coaching evolve to, I think, where it is today, where it's much more common practice, not used by everybody? It could be, but tell me about the trajectory of it's not so much the career of coaching, but the genre of coaching.
Yeah, it's a really great story and really great news to share on that front is that coaching is being more and more widely accepted. And it's almost expected now that if you're in a leadership role, you get a coach. I think Bill Gates famously said one time, everybody needs a coach. So if you think about in athletics, the most elite performers have a coach. The best athletes have multiple coaches around them. And so coaching is not a thing for the weak or the struggling or the hurting. Certainly it can help someone who's struggling or can help someone who needs to get stronger in an area. But it's not just for a weakness. Coaching is something that the very best employ in order to continue to get better. And so the great thing is that is being more widely recognized. In fact, just recently, I had a client come to me. He's an executive in a pretty large company, and he wanted to hire me himself out of his own pocket, hire me as his executive coach to just help him advance and grow and become a better leader. And when his boss got wind of it, almost by accident, his boss said, whoa, hang on. You're hiring an executive coach? Not only is that great, but let the company pay for that. We'll support you in that. Like, that's not something you need to hide. Like, we want to be a part of it. And so now his company is paying for his coaching because they were thrilled with the idea that he was taking the initiative to grow, that he wanted to be better, that he recognized that there's more and I can do more and I want to get there. And so the company was very supportive of that. And that is more often the case now.
Have you seen the model where a coach will be available for all of the C-suiters, for example, the senior executives in an
Yeah.
organization or a group of executives, that those individuals can have private conversations with the coach, private relationships with the
Yes.
coach, but nevertheless, there's one person under contract, so that's more available to everyone in the organization.
Yeah, there's a lot of coaching models, including having a coach on a retainer or doing group or team coaching or having a single coach that's available to multiple people to leverage either on a regular basis or as needed. And so there's lots of ways to work that. I have a lot of clients I work with one-on-one. I have a few that I work with the entire executive team. So all of the senior leaders, CEO and all of the direct reports of the CEO. And sometimes I work with them individually. Sometimes I work with them in a group setting where we will do additional things like goal setting and problem solving and tackling challenges and team health and communication and things like that to make them a really healthy, cohesive leadership team. And so, yeah, there's a lot of different models and ways to leverage a coach in an organization that's more than just the one-on-one individual coaching.
Well, I've really appreciated the diversity of our conversation today,
Yeah,
from
we've covered a lot of
imposter
ground, haven't we?
syndrome, book writing, and coaching. They're all related. Let's go back to imposter syndrome and finish up. Is there a single tip that we can finish out with? Is there something that you like to focus people's attention on when it comes to dealing with imposter syndrome?
So I'm going to give you the punchline, right? The secret that it really comes down to, as I said in the book, there's 10 habits that I unpack and several mindset shifts, but one of the sort of foundational pieces is imposter syndrome at the core is the fear of vulnerability. It's the fear that if people figure out who you really are and what you really are, that's going to be bad for you. And yet, vulnerability is the cure for imposter syndrome. When you open up and get honest and be really genuine and authentic with people, what you find almost universally, 99 times out of 100, you find that they don't respect you less, they respect you more. They don't appreciate you less, they appreciate you more. They admire you more when you're honest and authentic. And when you show weakness, when you acknowledge an area of lack or a lack of knowledge about something, you actually gain people's respect. You don't lose it. And that in turn boosts your confidence because you realize, oh, that thing that I thought was horrible, that was going to be my undoing if anyone ever figured it out, it really wasn't that big a deal. And I share several examples of that in the book, of things coming out, so to speak, and people realizing it. Not only was it not that big a deal, but I'm glad now that I got honest about it because now I can learn and grow in that area without feeling like I have to run around and hide it. And so there's a lot more that we can unpack there. I know we're running short on time, but you really have to understand that in order to conquer this thing, you've got to be willing to talk about it. You've got to be willing to acknowledge, yes, I deal with self-doubt. And more often than not, when one person acknowledges that, everyone around them starts to say, you know what, me too. And I'm so glad you said that because now we can talk about it. And so just getting open and vulnerable and being authentic is the start of that journey. It's an important step in the process that's going to help you overcome that self-doubt.
Kris, thank you for the fantastic conversations today. I've learned a lot, and I look forward to sharing this conversation with so many other people.
Thank you, Barry. I enjoyed it, man. It was great to be here.
Wrapping up, what's the one thing you can implement today? I think it's recognizing you can say, I don't know, and still feel like a leader. I did that throughout my career as a CEO. And when I didn't know something, I simply sought out ways to learn about it. Try it out. People will respect you for it. Thank you for listening, and congratulations. You are a member of the End of the Show Club. If you have any questions or want to get in touch, you can send me a note. The address is leadershipcareeraccelerator@gmail.com. And check out and engage with me on Substack at Leadership Career Accelerator.